Prosecution service जो है relatively it's a new service and it will take time to grow into a mature service. There are a number of issues between investigators and prosecutors which are due to the nature of responsibilities that each have. So prosecutor एक नई branch है, लेकिन it is like it will require a lot of time to mature. There's a need for a well-trained prosecutors and investigators. And as a matter of fact, prosecutors और investigators को बड़ा मिल के काम करना होता है. It is not कि investigators एक अलग silo world में हैं और prosecutors जो हैं वो एक अलग उसमें हैं. It's a kind of a work that they have to do together. So there is a need for not only well-trained investigators, but there is also need for well-trained prosecutors as well. Good coordination and teamwork is extremely important, although teamwork and coordination is the real spine of an organization. Organizations that have a good coordination, coordinating work, they are very efficient. So, but in this particular case, in prosecution and in investigation, there has to be a very good coordination and teamwork. It is not one service superior to the other service. It is the task which is more important. So they have to work like a team, not one over the other or one being more important than the other. Advise investigators to have, so prosecutors can advise investigators to collect such evidence in investigation which is admissible in the court, and not to go for evidence which will not be one according to the law or which will not be admissible in court. If we quoting the example of Japan, where in Japan the conviction rate is 99%, the relationship between the prosecutor and investigator is extremely important. The prosecutors can call witnesses for interview in order to see whether the investigation done by the police was done in the right way. They can also ask the witnesses whether they were coerced, whether they were threatened to give some kind of a statement or not. And if they find it so, they send back the case to the investigators to bring in evidences which are not taken under pressure by the witnesses. So even then, if they find, the prosecutors find in Japan that the case is such, they instruct the police to have such evidence which is admissible in the court. So there's a strong, the countries which have a very powerful or a strong criminal justice system, there the relationship between the prosecutor and investigator is that of a kind of a teamwork. So this is one example, and we see that in Japan the conviction rate is high. There are the negatives of why the conviction rate is high, but you know, we do see in Japan the crime rate as much lower. Based on crime pattern, assess the gaps in investigation. One can have a good look at the crime pattern in a particular area where the crime is committed and see what are the gaps in investigation and prosecution, with the purpose to identify resources required for training people, human resource at national, provincial and district levels. So it's important, there is a need to conduct a study, there is a need to conduct some research, of course in a very progressive way, in a very gradual way in Pakistan, and to find out what is the nature of crime and what are the gaps between prosecution and investigation, and therefore that particular kind of a training should be provided to human resource. Strengthen the criminal prosecution services and police-prosecutor coordination by security of tenure of prosecutors. This is very important. There is in our culture, we find that there is all evidence if the criminal or the person who has committed a crime or has not committed a crime but is supported by influential people, there is this pressure, sometimes very subtle kind of a pressure. Sometimes it's the money which plays around, and the evidence is an effort to remove the evidences. There is or to hide the evidences. So or to not to let a particular prosecutor who's doing his job in a very professional way. So it's important that they should be given security of tenure. The other is empower them to reject weak cases and should be specialist in the prosecutors should also be specialist in their own particular area. Just as investigators should be specialists for a particular kind of a crime, prosecutors should also be specialists in their respective crime. It is not that they're taking up all kinds of cases that are coming up, be it of homicide, kidnapping, terrorism or cybercrime. So prosecutors should also be specialists, and they should be trained, and they should be given power to reject cases which are not well investigated.